I'm Caroline Moderesi-Tirani. You're watching Huffpost Live. House Speaker John Boehner announced Friday that he's leaving Congress at the end of October. While his abrupt resignation stunned some, shock quickly gave way to questions about the future of the Republican Party and whether or not ultra-conservatives like Ted Cruz will dominate the party's agenda. Well, joining me now to discuss are Matthew Del Carlo, chairman of the California Young Republican Federation, Rick Wilson, a national GOP media consultant, Sean Pittman, an attorney and political analyst, and Rebecca Cinderbrand, politics editor at the Washington Post. So thanks everyone for joining me today. And Rick, I'll start with you. So let's talk a little bit about timing here. What did you make of Boehner's timing of this decision, and do you think it was the right time to do it?
Well, look, he was clearly a guy, if you watch the weekend shows and you talk to folks in Congress, this was clearly a guy who was pretty much defeated. He was done, and he was dialing it in at best. And so, when you can't come up to the plate every day and swing as hard as you can, you ought to think about whether you belong in that role. He clearly thought about that, and he made a decision. I think the timing of having the Pope visit, which he'd been trying to accomplish for over 20 years, was really important to him. And so I think that once he had accomplished that, it felt to him like that was a nice coda on his career. And that was that. I think he pretty much at that point decided that he'd had enough fun for one career.
Enough fun for one career. All right, well, let's talk a little bit about the fact that you, in your words, he was done, it was over. So 538, Nate Silver's website, they put out an interesting piece today about the fact that, yes, it's absolutely true the GOP were very divided when it came to John Boehner's tenure, but also they were extremely united, more united actually than they had been in a long time when it came to being united against the Democrats. Take a look at this graph, and you can see here that, the unity score for Republicans in votes against the Democrats in the House of Representatives actually was above the 90 percentile up until 2010 and then beyond. You can see the dips there in the early 70s, but far more unified at this stage. What do you make of that, Rick?
Well, look, the great unifier here was not John Boehner, but Barack Obama. And when you look at the work Boehner did, which is commendable on a couple of areas, there was not one Republican vote, not a single one for Obamacare. That was John Boehner holding the line with his caucus and making this thing as disciplined as he possibly could. Now, there were plenty of other areas where you can criticize John Boehner, where he, immediately sort of fell victim to the institutional capture of being afraid of the shutdowns and being nervous about, being seen to be the mean, bad, stupid Republican Party and not really having a plan and a communications approach to go out and scrap with Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid every single day.
Interesting. What do you make of that, Sean?
Well, I think the earlier speaker was absolutely correct. I mean, John Boehner was the guy who held everything together here. I mean, I think what we're looking at now is the real impact is the question, right? If John Boehner is not conservative enough for these Republicans, then who is? I mean, John Boehner made it very clear that he thought that his job was to protect the institution, but there are others who thought that what the nation needs is important. And now he's dealing with a block of Republicans he was dealing with a block of Republicans that seem to care more about their districts than they did the nation. And I think that's the real impact of his loss.
Yeah, I want to take a little time to play a clip. Here's an interview with CNN after John Boehner's resignation. Republican Congressman Peter King shared his reactions with Dana Bash. Take a listen to this.
I think it signals that crazies have taken over the party to the party that you can remove a Speaker of the House who's second in line to be president, a constitutional officer in the middle of his term with no allegations of impropriety, a person who's honest and doing his job. This has never happened before in our country. He could have stayed on. I would say a solid 3/4, 80%, 85% of the Republican Party supports John Boehner.
Matthew, is he right? Have the crazies taken over the party?
I don't know. I think John was looking at the whole picture. I think he, Frank was saying, that he stepped down because it was time to offer new, fresh blood. And I think Kevin McCarthy, who's thrown his hat in the ring today, is going to be able to do that. I think Kevin's going to have a much easier ability to control the perceived radical element of Congress. And Kevin McCarthy brought a lot of these people into Congress since 2010 with his Young Guns program.
Yeah, I mean, Rick, do you agree? Do you think that there is an element now that the crazies have taken over the party, as John Boehner said? Or as Representative King said, forgive me.
I think I always take Peter King with a big grain of salt. There is a very passionate conservative fraction of the Republican caucus, and they're a large fraction, and they're a growing fraction, and they have felt very stymied by a lack of action on a number of items that they felt very passionately about. And so this isn't entirely just about the fact that the crazies knocked him out. It's also about the fact that Barack Obama won every battle with this guy except for Obamacare, on the things that they cared about. And they didn't see him standing up and fighting hard enough. And this didn't just extend to the hard Tea Party type guys. There were also a lot of rank and file members who I've spoken to who have said to me, look, this guy just couldn't hold our caucus together. You've got to be able to bond together the fiscal conservatives, the social conservatives, the Tea Party folks, the business conservatives. You've got to be able to bring this whole coalition together and hold them together. And it's not something that they felt like he was comfortable or happy doing toward the end here. And that, the future may not be any better, but they're at the point now where they were very frustrated, and that frustration really spilled out at this last junction.
Yeah, frustration, certainly. I want to play a clip of CBS's Face the Nation on Sunday, where moderator John Dickerson asked Speaker Boehner if some Republicans were unrealistic about their goals in government, and here's how the Speaker responded.
The Bible says, beware of false prophets. And there are people out there, spreading noise about how much can get done. I mean, this whole idea that we're going to shut down the government to get rid of Obamacare in 2013, this plan never had a chance. But over the course of the August recess in 2013 and the course of September, a lot of my Republican colleagues who knew it was a fool's errand, really, they were getting all this pressure from home to do this. And so we got groups here in town, members of the House and Senate here in town, who whip people into a frenzy believing they can accomplish things that they know are never going to happen.
Yeah, Matthew, what do you think of that?
He had a very pragmatic approach to a lot of things, but at the same time, I don't think he really had a good relationship to all the new freshmen and sophomores that were in Congress. That's why I feel the leadership changes could be a good thing. And I think John recognized that. And I think he did a courageous thing by stepping down, and is going to allow new blood and new energy into the leadership.
Yeah, Rebecca, let's talk a little bit about the possible new blood and some of the old blood that might be stepping up to the plate here. Talk to me about who is a potential candidate to be John Boehner's replacement at the moment.
Well, of course, you have, as you mentioned, Kevin McCarthy, who has put his hat in the ring today. And, the challenge for him, you've mentioned, he's popular right now, or he's at least well regarded right now by some of those Tea Party members who've given the Speaker so much trouble. Of course, getting John Boehner's endorsement as his replacement can't necessarily help on that front. But then again, he hasn't been in the position where he's had to kind of force them to make those tough votes they don't necessarily want to make. So it's going to be interesting to see, particularly as you see other members who won't necessarily be able to claim the speakership, but could claim enough votes to kind of sap the mandate of the new speaker and send a message about, again, this is two separate Republican parties we're talking about on Capitol Hill. There were members who expressed dissatisfaction with John Boehner, but equally, when the news came, there were members who expressed to us their frustration with their fellow Republicans who, in their view, had pushed out the speaker.
Yeah, I mean, Sean, I'll be looking at a tale of two Republican parties once again. I mean, just a few years ago, we were talking about the Tea Party as sort of its own beast in amongst the GOP itself. And now we're looking at this sort of very different kind of schism. But nonetheless, do you see it as two very different GOPs at the moment?
I think you do, because at the end of the day, while this looks like a victory for the Tea Party, I think that's only perception. I mean, what got rid of John Boehner was he was a good man who realized that he was in the middle of government not working, and I think that's the real victory here, and I think that speaks to the type of man he was. But at the end of the day, especially with the presidential races going on, I mean, how does that impact people like Jeb Bush, who thought going down the line here, particularly next year, that his money and his experience and his name would rise him up to be the candidate. But if you look at where we are today, that perceived victory would suggest that he is not the guy. So I don't think you're going to have two factions because only one can prevail.
Interesting. Yeah, Rick, what do you think about that? And, how this sort of mini fight over the speakership actually has some ramifications for what we're looking at in 2016 for the Republicans?
Well, I'm trying to encourage both sides, and I talk to folks that work with folks on both sides of the Republican, the Tea Party caucus versus the more traditional establishment wing. I work with both of these kind of groups, both these kind of folks. I'm encouraging folks to look for a speaker who is a disruptor. I wrote a piece about it today. I called it "We Need a Disruptor of the House." You need someone, I believe, at this point, who's going to go into the House of Representatives and really change the way it does business. And that means the business community guys aren't going to get everything they want every day, and the Tea Party guys aren't going to get what they want every day. But it's going to be this middle path. And I think the most important thing an incoming speaker can do, and I think the main criteria for selection of these folks, and just my opinion, is that they don't look for somebody who is an articulate and passionate and clear-speaking person who doesn't talk to the American people in the same way that legislative leaders tend to talk. They don't want to hear about subcommittees and markups and CRs and debt ceilings. They want to be spoken to in a way that's relevant and meaningful to them. And I think that is the criteria that...
Rick, I'm just going to stop you for a second, sorry, because we're really losing your audio. If you wouldn't mind just picking up your phone, our control room will give you a call. We'll make sure you get your audio loud clear. But, what do you think about that, Matthew? This idea of, what's happening with John Boehner is almost sort of a microcosm of what we're seeing with the Republican Party at large, particularly as we're going into 2016.
Well, it's an interesting thought, but a really good group of candidates are running for president right now, and we do have some vocal individuals, including Mr. Trump, but we also have individuals like Ben Carson, and we are in this contested primary. But that being said, I think the people that are coming up right now, the new leadership, including Kevin McCarthy, I think are going to be able to handle both sides of our party. I mean, when Kevin just announced today, he's talking about working with conservatives and moderates together under the banner of freedom and opportunity. I think, like I said before, he came in with this class or multiple classes as the Young Guns program, bringing and cultivating these new crop of congressional members. Some of them are Tea Party, some of them are not. But he knows how to work with those two different groups. There's a reason why Kevin Spacey models his Frank Underwood personality on his TV series under Kevin McCarthy. And he knows how to work the room, and he knows how to handle both elements of the party.
All right, so talk to me a little bit more about that, Rebecca, in terms of being able to handle all these disparate elements of the Republican Party. Did John Boehner actually lose his way, do you think, or do you think that these more disconcerted voices actually started to gain steam and get louder?
Well, from the start, coming in, it was as though the Republican leadership was kind of riding a tiger. They rode this wave of passion. These new members who came, a lot of them were outsiders. Some of them had never necessarily held elected office before. And so the one refrain you heard again and again from people who are veterans on Capitol Hill is that these people don't get how the system works. Now, that can be seen as a benefit, as a bonus, if you're a voter who's frustrated with Washington and wants to see change. But if you're someone who, like John Boehner, is used to kind of keeping the gears running and keeping progress going, that can be a huge frustration. And so in a way, they were speaking two different languages or speaking past each other, and they were never necessarily going to wind up on the same page.
Yeah, Rick, I think we've got you back now. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you just fine.
Fantastic. Yeah, we can hear you well as well. All right, you talked to us a little bit about this. Rebecca was just talking about John Boehner being somebody who kind of wanted to keep the trains running on the track. Do you feel like, whoever comes in, whoever takes his place, if they are listening to these more ultra-conservative voices, are we going to see a Congress, once again, that just doesn't get anything done? This is one of the big complaints, I think, that the general public have with both sides of the political aisle. Do you think that whoever comes in to fill Boehner's role is actually going to have the idea of getting things done and getting things accomplished at the top of their priority list?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Listen, here's the thing. There's an awful lot that a new speaker could do by not doing things. There's an awful lot a new speaker could do by not just, if the scorekeeping mechanism that the media and the world thinks is relevant to Congress is how they spent more money have they done more programs, then we would be then John Boehner would be a hero right now. It's not about spending more. Right now, it's got to be about how you change the way that the House operates, and frankly, there's some of this brewing up in the Senate as well. But you've got to change the way these places operate. You've got to reduce the number of bills that are coming through there that are these 10,000-page monstrosities that are lobbyist-driven. You've got to do some fundamental reform. I think if the new speaker, reformed the House, it didn't just look like he wanted to make the trains run on time and to keep business as usual going. I think he'd be very well suited to the public mood right now. I do agree that Kevin McCarthy is a very good operator. He's a very smart guy. The deal's not done yet. There are still an awful lot of folks that are out there that haven't committed. There are an awful lot of folks who are jockeying for this position more than you usually see in a speaker's race. I mean, not that there are a lot of speaker's races, historically to judge from, but there are a lot of folks who put their names out there that are interested clearly. And I think that, he's going to be called to, before this election gets put in the bag, he's going to be called to show that he can be a different kind of speaker and that he can do something that's more than the procedural, let's just pass one spending bill after another, one CR after another.
Yeah, what do you think about that, Matthew?
I agree, but let's just, he just became a majority leader not too long ago. He has a whip operation that's very smoothly run. He already got Paul Ryan's endorsement along with other key congressional members. I think there will be a couple other individuals that they'll throw in their hat in the ring, but I don't underestimate Kevin McCarthy. I mean, his rise to power from California and the state assembly all the way to Congress to majority leader to now potentially speaker has all happened within the 10-year period of time. This guy does not play checkers. He plays chess.
He's very smart. No question about it. No doubt about it.
Love a good checkers and chess metaphor. All right, well, let's talk a little bit about what Paul Krugman had to say about this. In his recent New York Times op-ed, he wrote, quote, John Boehner was a terrible, very bad, no good Speaker of the House. Under his leadership, Republicans pursued an unprecedented strategy of scorched earth obstructionism, which did immense damage to the economy and undermined America's credibility around the world. Still, things could have been worse, and under his successor, they almost surely will be worse. Bad as Mr. Boehner was, he was just a symptom of the underlying malady, the madness that has consumed his party. Sean, do you think it's a fair assessment?
I don't think it is. I mean, everybody's entitled to their opinion, but I don't think that describes John Boehner at all. And listen, I'm a Democrat, and I will give him the credit of being a gentleman and trying to lead his party. I think at the end of the day, he recognized that there were big things that needed to be done. And I think he left because he couldn't get it done. And, I mean, at the end of the day, look at what we're still dealing with. I mean, we got a government that needs to be funded. I mean, the Planned Parenthood thing still needs to be worked out. I mean, we got to lift funding caps on the military and these social programs. I mean, we got to lift the debt ceiling. I mean, there's a lot of work to be done. So a new speaker has to come in not only trying to control the two factions of his party or her party, they've got to realize that America needs work to be done in Congress. So I think that's a very unfair assessment.
Interesting. Rick, what do you think of Krugman's assessment of the situation?
Well, Paul Krugman's always my go-to for a fair look at the Republican Party. Not. Look, I think that Paul's ideological edge on that thing is he's just trying to make a sort of a snarky point about the Republican Party more broadly. Look, the fact of the matter is that leadership changes over time in the body, sometimes slowly, sometimes quickly. It's about to change quickly. And I don't think Paul Krugman's assessment of the catastrophe that he's describing is real. I mean, this is an economy that has been marked by the emergence of Obamacare as a major factor, and it's been marked by enormous liquidity in the stock market given to it by the Fed. It's not something that the Republican Party has any particular control over in shaping the destiny and the direction of the U.S. economy right now.
What do you think about his comment, though, about the idea that, the government shutdown, we already had one the last 3 years, that government shutdown and also this sort of wrangling has done immense damage, not just to the Republican Party, but also to the way that the outside world views American politics and American democracy?
Well, look, the whole battles over shutdowns, the Republicans have problem with the shutdown battles because of one main thing. And the main thing they have a problem with is that they don't ever have a communications plan going into it. They don't ever plot out how they're going to sell what's happening, or they'll explain what's happening, or explain the alternatives. And so you end up in a situation where very frequently they shoot themselves in the foot over shutdowns, where they promise a lot, they have dramatic moments on the Senate floor, and then, Harry Reid always has a gun to their head because of the filibuster, and that's that. So I think there are a lot of pathways that Republicans should communicate about shutdowns that they haven't ever used before. And I do think there are times when you have to really draw a marker that challenges how the business is done in the House and the Senate right now. I mean, there were a lot of people who were very respectful and careful about it, but who said, when the Iran deal came up, it was of such consequence that the Senate should have suspended the filibuster rule. They should have worked under Rule 22 and other things to change the way they were doing it. And so, if the alternative is always either Barack Obama's veto or a shutdown, take the veto sometimes. Get in the fight. Have a communications battle with Barack Obama rather than this political battle where you announce your intention from the beginning, which is we're going to roll over eventually. We're just going to hurt ourselves some first.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, what do you make of these sort of optics of all of this, Matthew? The idea that, sometimes it is, as Rick was saying, better to kind of force a veto. Do you think that is the kind of politics that the American people want to see happening?
That's a really good question. I think Rick was hitting it on the head, where we do have a branding and messaging problem. We have to explain better why we're doing the things we're doing. I think that, Boehner didn't really do that really well when he was handling the various elements of Congress, and same thing with Mitch McConnell. And I think that's why we do need new blood and new leadership. And that's why I think Kevin McCarthy, and I'm kind of hitting this over ahead, but I think he's going to do a phenomenal job. I've known his background here in California, being the chief of staff in Sacramento. I've seen what he's done in a very short period of time, and I think he's going to offer a new perspective and a new voice that I think is going to be able to articulate what we as a Republican Party are doing in the legislative house. And I'm very excited about what he's going to be able to bring for California and for the party in general. I think it's going to be a new opportunity for us to rebrand ourselves. But let's also talk one thing. The Republican Party, as much as everyone says it's in trouble, we have 2/3 of the state legislators. We have the majority of the governorships in America right now. And this is all under the last 6 years of Obama. So, where you talk about local or state politics, California, or the Republican Party in general, is doing better. And I think now we'll see if that's going to continue on the national level.
Interesting. All right, well, let's talk about Mitch McConnell. You brought him up a second ago, Matthew. Rebecca, talk to us a little bit about the latest. I've got the Washington Times here saying under pressure, McConnell, pushed to resign as Senate Majority Leader. Give us the latest on this.
Well, look, it's the same sort of rumblings that you heard about John Boehner for a very long time. It doesn't seem as though Mitch McConnell is necessarily going anywhere. He did seem to be affected and a little bit shaken, perhaps, by the kind of quick exit of Boehner. You saw in his remarks on the floor, not on the Senate floor, on the day that Boehner left. These sorts of leadership rumbles right now, it feels as though no member of the leadership is necessarily safe or can feel safe. We remember a time when Speaker of the House was perhaps the most secure job in politics, and no more. The last several speakers have all left, not necessarily on their own timetable. And so what we're seeing now is this sense that, particularly when you are seen to be acting as a member, an agent of the establishment, looking to make things happen rather than to prevent the other side from advancing their own agenda, that you will be in trouble.
Yeah, and give us a sense of the timetable as well. I mean, of course, the Speaker announced his resignation last week. Give us a timetable as to, when are we going to see any kind of voting on who the new Speaker is going to be? And also there's that, pesky but ever-present fear and threat of government shutdown looming. Talk to us about that, Rebecca.
Yeah, this is all taking place against that backdrop. There are a number of very important fights coming up. So in the midst of these elections, and this is, the process leading up to the election, you have the fight over government funding, you have the fight over the Exim Bank, you have the fight over Planned Parenthood, you have all of these fights that are coming up against the backdrop of these elections. And let's not forget, in addition to Speaker, there's also the race to be the new House Majority Leader. And so a number of people in that race, more announced candidates, or more people who are rumored to be in that hunt, even than Speaker, and that's looking to be somewhat of a fierce fight as well. So all of these fights are going to play out at the same time. And so the question is how the policy fights and how the action on the floor impacts what happens when the caucus votes.
Yeah, Rick, talk to me about that. I mean, do you think that these disparate points are sort of going to have an align? Do you see a smooth next few weeks, or do you think we're going to see a couple of tornadoes yet? Oh, Rick, for some reason we can't get your sound. We're going to try and get it back again. I think they might have muted on your iPhone. I don't know. Do you want to just try and unmute it?
Back?
Much better. Yes, go for it.
Okay. I do think the next couple of weeks are going to be very sporty. I think there's going to be a lot of speculation inside the body about who's in charge, who's got the strong hand, and who's got control of these various races. And I think you're going to see the conservatives play a very hard game in the whip race to try to put together a whip team that is going to help drive conservative legislation as they go forward.
Yeah, we see that Dennis Ross has announced that his run for the Republican whip. Matthew, what do you think of Dennis Ross?
You know, I think he's an interesting man. I don't know a tremendous amount about him, but I know that, he has connections with Kevin, and Kevin's going to probably bring up his crew into this operation. I think he's going to surround himself with a team of loyalists. They're going to help him be speaker and be a successful speaker. But he's been doing this for quite some time, and it's going to be interesting to see how the transition is. And it's going to be in a couple weeks. You might see some people drop out after they initially announce that they're going to be running for speaker.
Interesting. Sean, I've got to ask, do you think that the Democrats are going to try and take advantage of this moment and actually sort of highlight these, infighting within the Republican Party as yet another reason why they shouldn't be trusted in running the country come 2016?
Well, I certainly think that's the political thing to do, but, the reason this has happened is because the Democrats, particularly the president, has won everything that he's tried to do. So I think you will have some political posturing, but that's just something that comes along with the territory.
Well, we'll have to wait and see as to how it all shakes out. But I want to thank you all very much today for joining us. Matthew, Rick, Sean and Rebecca. Thanks
so much.
Thank you for having me.
And guys, thanks so much for watching. For more information on Boehner's exit and the GOP agenda, check out the links in the resource well below. And stick around, Alona Minkowski is up next.